Hey everybody, my name's Wolf, and this video is going to be a little bit different. So settle down, grab your popcorn, strap in, and prepare for a noob rambling session. So the normal format of my videos is I open at this point with a little bit of a paragraph and then switch into my usual shameless plug for my links. This one I'm not. I'll be honest, this is the first video I've done that is not scripted, so be ready for me going off on tangents. I'm doing this video because I wanted to get something out, and at the moment I'm spending all my time trying to turn the Warhammer 40k 10th edition rulebook into an interactive how to play in bite-sized chunks. All the other videos I've seen, which although are very technically impressive and studio quality, they are ramming so much information down your throat, I don't think it's conducive to anybody new coming into the game. So, me being me, thought I could do a way better job. And then realised I don't have, or at least I don't think I have, the technical abilities or the actual ability as a YouTube creator to turn a rulebook into an interactive video. But I'm giving it my best shot, and I think I can actually do this. The main problem I found with the other videos I watched on how to play is they're literally just ramming rule after rule after rule down your throat. I'm trying to create a video where you play along with it and build up your knowledge stage by stage, and once you're confident at stage 1 then we move to stage 2 and so on. So hopefully it'll work. Every job I've had in the past I've ended up being an unofficial trainer, so I guess I seem to have an ability to pass my knowledge on in a way that is concise and easy for people to learn, so hopefully that translates into the video. Anyway, I'm rambling already and we're 2 minutes in. So what I intend to cover in the rest of this video is just some general bits and bobs about 40k, how I got into it, what I would recommend, little tidbits of the lore that aren't quite long enough to fit into a full video of their own, things like that. So let's see how we go. Let's start with the obvious question, how did I get into 40k? Well, me and a group of friends, one of them got the Hero Quest board game. From there we progressed to Space Crusade, from there we progressed into Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and then some of the other mini games came out like Blood Bowl, Necromunda, Space Hulk. Then we progressed into 40k, and then we progressed into Epic, and I think between us we had pretty much every mini game going at the time. So what was my first 40k army? Well, that was an Eldar Samhan Windrider host. That was a fairly disgusting army at about 5,000 points. On top of that, I had 2 Blood Bowl teams, 3 Necromunda teams, the entire Dark Angels chapter in Epic scale with a Titan host, and a 10,000 point Undead army. Which is why as a kid I never had any money for drugs and alcohol. So do I still have those armies? Unfortunately not. By my early 20s my social group had changed and I hadn't played any type of Warhammer game in probably about 6 or 7 years. A friend of mine was a counsellor at a local school for, shall we say, troubled kids, and because I was moving away at the time I didn't have the space to take everything with me. So I donated every 40k and Fantasy Battle and minigame I had to the school for something for the kids to do. Do I regret that? Yes and no. You know, there was a lot of models there, but most of them are outdated. There was one hell of a collection on the Epic alone, and I really missed the original Space Hulk game, but at the end of the day, I wasn't using them, and they went to a good place. So, if you're planning on getting into 40k, is now a good time to start? As I've said in previous videos, absolutely. A lot of YouTubers, including myself, we have bad things to say about Games Workshop, and that's based on past experience. They do seem to have turned themselves around. At the end of the day, they are still a company and their main goal is to make money. But the way they are making money now is a lot better than what they used to be. And this really is, I believe, a golden age for 40k, and hopefully this will filter down into the other games they do as well. So yeah, if you're planning on getting into 40k, now is the time to do it. I would start definitely by buying one of those combat patrol boxes of whichever faction you want to play, and go from there. How easy is it to paint the models? To be honest, quite easy, just for a basic covering. If you're just going to slap a bit of paint on with just basic colours and not worry about highlighting and shading. Very simple and easy to pick up, especially if you're using a wet palette. If you want to start getting into the more technical advanced things and start highlighting, low lighting, blending, shading and all the other techniques, then that's where the skill comes into it, and it will take you some time to pick up. But just getting a basic model painted with some colours, you'll find in no time you're going through an army in minutes per model. So which paints would I recommend? Well, straight out of the gate, definitely Games Workshop paints. They are by far the best quality out there, just like their miniatures. They are also a bit more expensive, and if you're going to use a wet palette, which I highly recommend, Games Workshop paints are not the best for that. If you are going to use a wet palette, then I would recommend the Army paints. They are cheaper, they're just as good, they're the same colours, and because they're in dropper bottles, it makes it easy to use in a wet palette. A lot of people swear by Valleos. Valleos are... I do have some Valleos that are a little bit more expensive than the Army painters, and I can't actually tell any difference. As for brushes, if you go down an independent store, don't go to a Games Workshop store. Their brushes are a bit too thick and a bit too expensive, like all Games Workshop stuff. But yeah, if you go down to an independent gaming store, they should do brushes for a couple of pounds or a couple of dollars each. You don't want to be spending any more than that. But again, don't buy the cheapest crap either. You can get some really stupidly expensive brushes, but until you're at the level of producing world-class miniatures, you don't want to be wasting money on brushes. So, which wet palette should I buy? Well, frankly, none of them. You're looking at about $50, whatever that converts to UK or wherever else you are in the world, for something you can make for $5 to $10. And if you've got the bits in the house, it's not going to cost you anything. So all you're going to need is a airtight, sealable lunchbox, preferably one that's clear. You're going to need some sponge cloths, some grease-proof paper, which I believe Americans refer to as parchment paper, and that's it. So take your lunchbox, take the sponge cloth, cut it so it's about an inch shorter than the base of the lunchbox, put the sponge cloth in. Take the parchment paper, cut that so it's a couple of centimetres smaller than the sponge cloth. Put the parchment paper on top of the sponge cloth and then pour in water so it's about halfway up the sponge cloth. Job done, you have a wet palette. The way the wet palette works is the sponge sucks the water up and passes it through the parchment paper, but the parchment paper then will not allow it to pass back down. So when you put a little bit of paint on the parchment paper, you then just move it around a little bit, which sucks up the water and thins the paint for you. It will instantly level up your painting abilities by 10 levels. There we go, I said it in a previous video, how to make a wet palette in less than 2 minutes. So the lore of 40k has been running for many years. Is there a part of it that you don't agree with or prefer a fan theory? Well, actually yes, and that involves Emperor Chris himself. The official backstory behind the Emperor is that many years ago in our timeline, 50 shamans got together and all committed suicide at the same time. So in which case their souls all entered the warp, they were able to find each other, coalesce into one super soul, and were then reborn as the Emperor, making him a powerful psychic and a perpetual. Personally, I've never particularly liked that explanation, and it wasn't until the Horus Heresy books came out that there was a particular quote in there that then kind of set me off on my own headcanon. So this quote is from the book Master of Mankind. So, does he even breathe, she demanded. Tell me that, Custodian. Have you ever heard him breathe? He is a relic left over from the Dark Age, a weapon left out of its box, now running rampant. Valdor blinked once, the first time she'd seen him blink so far. Now, I quite like the idea behind that theory, that the Emperor himself is actually an entirely genetically engineered super being from the ground up, but didn't have his psychic powers at the time. As the warp storms being created by the Eldar being naughty were getting worse and starting to cut worlds off, this super being they had created was activated and given one simple order: save humanity. Well, using his genius intellect, Chris, because he wasn't an emperor at the time, decided that now is not the time to save humanity and he on his own cannot do it. So first of all, he travelled off to another planet before the warp storms got too bad, made the deal with the Chaos Gods to get his psychic powers, then came back to Earth and laid low for a bit. Once the birth of Slaanesh had caused the warp storms to dissipate, that's when he decided it was time to start putting his plan into action. But he also knew he couldn't do it on his own, which is why the Emperor's been so obsessed with genetic manipulation. Started with the Custodies, then the Thunder Warriors, then the Primarchs, then the Space Marines. He was trying to make more of himself, and he's got better at it as he's gone along. The Custodies are still the pinnacle of genetic enhancement, but the Primarchs are literally genetically engineered from the ground up, and each of them has a facet of his own personality. So yeah, I think he's just building the Primarchs to make more of himself, to make it easier to conquer the galaxy. With there being 15 factions or so in 40k, do you think there are too many? Well, yes and no. The scope of the world that 40k is, there is always space for more factions. The problem is each individual playstyle has been taken up by a faction already, so all they're going to be doing now is just ripping off another faction that already exists. I do feel there are some factions that should never have hit the tabletop. The Custodies and the Grey Knights specifically. Grey Knights should always just be an optional extra for Space Marines for when they're dealing with demons. Well, not just Space Marines, but any Imperial forces. And the Custodies are, well, they have the Yamato effect, as I put it. They are that expensive and that powerful, they can't actually risk putting them to war, which is why the Yamato hardly ever left harbour. Where do I see 40k going in the future? Well, I don't ever think we're going to get an 11th edition now, because the way they've set this up. If you look at all the previous codexes, you get the points value with the data cards. Now they've put the points value separate, which means at any point they can change the points value of a unit, and it doesn't affect the data cards. So I don't think we're going to get another edition, at least not for another 8-9 years, if ever. But they can keep it fresh by constantly changing the points value. I mean, Eldar have already been nerfed and they're about to get nerfed again. So what's in my pile of shame? Oh god, where do I start? Currently, 9 Eldar jet bikes, 4 Wraith Guard, a Farseer, a Warwalker, a Wraith Lord, some Aspect Warriors. On top of that, I have approximately 70 Marines to paint between First and Primaris. On top of that, 60 Terminators. I'm trying to collect the entire First and Third companies of the Dark Angels. And also I've got some Chaos Space Marines and some Demons lying around and a few Necron Warriors to paint. Do I still play 40k? Unfortunately not. Since I donated everything away, I have been very slowly just replacing my collection, because again, within my social group, nobody else is really into 40k apart from myself. However, with 10th coming out, and me suddenly finding a newfound passion for painting again, chances are I'll probably make an army list and go out there and have a bash. What would I like to see next? Definitely the return of Space Hulk, but it has to be in the form of the first version. The second and third editions they did were frankly shite. How do you feel about female Space Marines? Fuck. Well, I suppose I was going to cover this sooner or later. But if you've seen any of the other controversy about this, this is an absolute can of worms. But here's my stance on it. First of all, Games Workshop's official stance is there is no such thing as female Marines because of reasons. My argument to this is if Belisarius Cawl can, over the space of 10,000 years, improve on the original Space Marine design to make the Primaris, there's no reason at all why he can't figure out how to put gene seed in a female body. Officially, we're never going to get female Space Marines. The closest we've got to it are Sisters of Battle. But if you want some female Space Marines, then go convert some. I have. At the end of the day, it's your plastic crack. You do what you want with it. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. If you got this far, thank you very much, but I think it's about time I got back to my project of converting the rules into an interactive video. So I hope you're all looking forward to that, and I hope you do all play along with it, and it helps you learn how to play the game. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you.